And this morning we're continuing in our series on the route to independence, which is where as a local church we believe that we are headed under God's hand. And this week we look at the challenge to us to use the many blessings that God has given to us, financial and otherwise, not just for ourselves and our own satisfaction and our own pleasure, but for the growth of His kingdom. And as our text, we're looking at the teaching of Jesus himself, dipping into a part of the Sermon on the Mount, that great sermon, the greatest sermon ever preached, where Jesus withdrew to a mountainside, somewhere in the northwest of Galilee, not far from Capernaum, and he began to teach his disciples with a radical call for them to be different. Different in terms of their moral conduct, different in terms of their religious practices, and now in this part that Carol read to us, different in their rejection of materialism and the pursuit of worldly treasures. It was a sermon that was highly relevant to the disciples 2,000 years ago, and it's a word that is highly relevant to us today, and nowhere more so than in that call to reject materialism, the God of our age. Our consumer society thinks that you're saved by what you consume, that the pursuit of material things is what will bring ultimate satisfaction. The lottery has become a national obsession. In the 20 years since it began, it has created 3,600 millionaires and paid out £53 billion in winnings. The website I looked at said that the average lottery winner bought 4.5 new cars. I'm not quite sure what you do with half a car. And among the more unusual purchases were tarantulas and a pair of new hips for the wife. Some 70% of the UK population, that's 32 million people, play the lottery on a regular basis. And it's quite interesting that among school children, the ambition to win the lottery is one of the most frequently mentioned ambitions when you ask them what they want to be or what they want to do when they grow up. It's a symbol of our age, of its hopes and ambitions. We are, as a nation, we are consumed by stuff. As someone has said, we buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to impress people we don't even like. And as Christians, we're not immune from all of this, from the seductive advertising that tells us we need to have that new kitchen, that wonderful new house, that wonderful holiday, that new car, if we're going to be truly happy. Paul Getty, the American billionaire oil magnate, was once asked, how much do you need to be satisfied in life? And his answer was, just a little bit more. Because we're never truly satisfied. The more you have, the more you want. The more you have, the less you're satisfied. The more you have, the more people, including the tax man, will come after it. The more you have, the more you leave behind. And at Rolls-Royce, I knew a lot of people just like that. The more they had, the more they wanted. I knew one finance director, main board finance director, who went to the managing director and said, I can't possibly manage on my 1 million plus package. I can't afford the boat that I've set my heart on. And he left the company in search of a more rewarding career. I had to listen to one very senior executive who told me that a top-of-the-range Jaguar was simply not good enough for him, and he had to have a Bentley, which the chief executive actually allowed him to have. And we have to admit that as Christians, we're probably compromised in this area more than in any other. When did we last examine our lives, our desires and ambitions, in the light of the Bible's teaching on money and possessions? And so God's word comes to us this morning with a very powerful challenge. And Jesus here cuts right to the heart of the issue with these 3 couplets in these verses, in which he talks about 2 different investment strategies, 2 different eye conditions, and 2 different masters that we serve. And by the way, I'll be spending rather more time in the first of these, so don't get too worried if you think I'm running out of time and I haven't reached the end of point 1. Two different investment strategies. The force of verse 19 comes across as a command. It's not simply just a good idea, not something that's worth thinking about and considering. It comes across with real force. Do not lay up treasure on earth, and do lay up treasure in heaven. And the key word here is treasure. It's that thing or things that we want more than anything else. That is our highest priority in life. Often we are blind ourselves to what it might be in our own lives. But I wonder, as we think, what would others say our treasure was? Our highest priority, the thing that drives us. What occupies our thoughts when we have nothing else to do? Is it that dream new house or that exotic holiday? What do we fret about and lose sleep over? Is it the decline in the stock market affecting our pension? What do we dread losing most? And what do we measure other people by? That's often a very good sign of where our own heart lies. What are the things we look for in other people? Jesus alludes in his day to fine clothing and a plentiful supply of food and gold and precious stones. But for us it could be material things, yes. But it could just as likely be status or career. It could be family or education or beauty. How much time is given over in television programs and in magazine articles to keeping our looks, to having the perfect figure? It's a major industry. It could be a hobby, baking that perfect cake, to choose a topical example. Or a leisure pursuit that takes up more and more of our time, so that we would rather do that than come and meet with God's people on a Sunday morning. And Jesus says, don't do it. Don't focus your entire energies on the things of this life. Why? Because it doesn't pay and it doesn't satisfy. Imagine you're considering two different investment opportunities. One is very short term. It pays a rather low rate of return, and at the end of the period all your capital is gone. But the other is for the long term. It pays a high rate of return and your capital is secure forever. Which would you choose? Well, it's rather obvious, isn't it? In Jesus' day, the things that people treasured just didn't last. The wonderful new coat, after a few years, the moths would get at it and it would be full of holes. The plentiful supply of food, like the man who built bigger and bigger barns, was apt to be destroyed by rats and other vermin. By the way, my version of the Bible has vermin rather than rust. I'm not quite sure where the difference comes. And the gold and precious stones were an inviting target for a thief. And it's the same for us. It doesn't last. It doesn't last. And it doesn't satisfy. There's been quite a lot of research done to show that while as a nation, certainly in my lifetime, we become much wealthier, and yet at the same time we have far more in the way of mental health issues. We're not any happier. We're 10 times more likely to suffer from depression than in the 1950s. And one piece of research I came across, and I don't know how they came by it, from the Institute of Humour, is that in the 1950s the average man laughed for 18 minutes a day, whereas today it's just 6 minutes. I'm not sure what he said about women, so I don't know. Now, Jesus is not here condemning wealth or having possessions. Don't get me wrong here. There's nothing wrong with having these things, with owning property or saving for a rainy day and making proper provision for the future. He's not saying that at all. We must be aware of falling into the trap of asceticism. Paul says to Timothy in 1 Timothy 4, "For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving." But rather he is condemning that relentless pursuit of materialism as being the focus of our lives, that thing which could be money or anything else that robs God of his rightful place on the throne of our hearts, because it doesn't last. and it doesn't bring ultimate satisfaction. You can't take it with you. And at the end of life, it's all gone. Job said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The more you have, the more you'll leave behind. It's of no use in the world to come. The story is told of an old miser who was determined to take his life's possession with him when he died. And on his deathbed, he got together 3 of his friends. One was a minister, one was a doctor, and one was a lawyer. And he gave them each an envelope with £50,000 in it. And he says, now when I die, when I'm buried, I want you to throw these envelopes in on top of the coffin before the earth is poured in on top. And so he died, and he was buried, and his 3 friends were round the grave, and they each threw in their envelope. And as they were driving away together, the minister who was driving stopped the car and said, look guys, my conscience is pricking me here. I've got to make a confession. I didn't throw in the whole amount. I held back £20,000 because the church needed a new roof. And the doctor said, well, since we're making a confession, I've got to confess as well. I kept back £30,000 for an extension to my surgery. And the lawyer looked at them both. He said, I'm absolutely ashamed of you. I put in a cheque for the whole amount. We can't take it with us. I had to smile this week when I received an email from an investment guru, a guy called Dan Denning, who writes in an online investment newsletter called Money Morning, which I seem to receive. I'm not quite sure why. And the title of this week's newsletter was, In the Long Run, You'll Be Dead, which I thought was very helpful this morning. Of course, he went then on to say how important it was, therefore, to make the right investments before that happened. And Jesus here is saying essentially the same thing, but he's an investment advisor that we can really trust. And while he's pretty pessimistic about the financial forecasts on the earth, he's very bullish about the investment opportunities in heaven. And so after that negative prohibition, do not, Jesus positively reinforces his command by saying, rather, we should lay up treasure in heaven, where the vagaries of nature and the sinfulness of man cannot get in and destroy. Now again, let me make something very clear at this point, because some have misunderstood this. This is not a doctrine of salvation by works, doing things so that we can earn brownie points with God and be accepted by him. The Bible is very clear on this point. Our salvation, our being right with God before a holy God, is nothing to do with ourselves, nothing to do with who we are and what we have done or what we can bring. It is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Only by grace can we enter. Only by grace can we stand, not by our human endeavour, but by the blood of the Lamb. But having been saved by his grace, we are then commanded to invest in the bank of heaven, where our investment will be secure and profitable, to invest in the future, the long term, to invest in God's kingdom. And that has profound implications for all of us. So what does that mean? What does that look like to invest in heaven? Well, Paul's letter to the church at Corinth in chapter 3, I think, fleshes out what it means to invest in the bank of heaven. Firstly, Paul rebukes the church for being worldly. I wonder what he'd say to us today. And then he goes on to stress the importance of us all being part of that building of the church of God. Remember how we thought about that last week? Playing our role, serving within the body. Listen to what he says in 1 Corinthians 3. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light, and it will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built up survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, and yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. The Bible makes it very clear that when Jesus comes back, We will all have to give an account of what we have done as stewards of what he has given to us, of all the many blessings and things that he has given to us, material or otherwise. And if what we have done with that has lasting value, then there will be a reward for us in heaven. But if it's consumed by the fire and there's nothing left, then yes, we will be saved, but there will be little or no reward. That's a sobering thought when we think of all the resources God has given to us in terms of our money, in terms of our time, in terms of our gifting. I wonder if at times our first thought is, how can I use these things for my benefit, for my pleasure? I wonder how often we think, how can I use these things for the kingdom of God, recognizing they belong to God. He's only given them, he's only loaned them to me. They're God's really. How can I use these things for him, for his kingdom, that it might grow and that people might be reached with the good news of the gospel? It's a very good question for us to think about, for us to consider. And particularly as we think of our journey on the road to independence and being a church that, under God, can stand on its own 2 feet. Am I prepared to invest sacrificially in God's kingdom? Or am I more interested in the pleasures of this life and the material things that I can acquire? And I'll give God something from what's left over. A servant of the Duke of Wellington said, when I saw his checkbook, or his check stubs, I knew the man. I wonder what our check stubs, or perhaps more now, our credit card statements say about us. Are we investing not just our possessions and our money, but our whole lives in heavenly things which will have lasting benefit? Jesus then goes on to give what has become a well-known wisdom saying, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where is our heart? Not the organ so much that pumps the blood through the body and sustains life, but the core of our being. Someone has put it, the wellspring of our personality. Where is our heart? Is it concerned for God and for his things, or simply for our own pleasure? You see, one of the problems, I believe, is that as Christians today we have little concept of heaven, of the wonderful life that is to come. Oh yes, we kind of believe it. One day we'll go to heaven and we'll be with Jesus. But we have little understanding of it, little appreciation of it. And the devil uses that to deceive us into following the very humanistic philosophy of let's eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. If we really understood the glory of eternity, we would easily see how futile things here on earth are that we pursue. The old hymn had it right, this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. Jesus then goes on to give 2 illustrations of what he means, which we'll cover now very briefly. The first has to do with the condition of our eyes, and the second, the master we serve. So first of all, he compares 2 different eye conditions. The eye is a lamp of the body, he says. The eye, for such a small organ, is so vitally important, and we all know that. If the eye is good, he says, we can see clearly. Our whole body is flooded with light. We can walk in a straight line and avoid obstacles that get in our way. We can easily see where we want to go, and we can reach our destination. But if our eye is diseased, we're full of darkness. We can't see clearly. We bump into things. We've no idea where we're going. Quite often we use that illustration with children, don't we? We put a blindfold around them, we put obstacles in the way and try and get them to cross from one side of the room to the other, and they can't do it. And spiritually, if we see the importance of investing properly in the things of God, our spiritual eye is good, and we are flooded with light. We see clearly. We make good decisions. We know exactly where we're headed. But if we're investing in the wrong things, and our focus is in the wrong things, it's a sign that our spiritual eye is diseased and we're walking in darkness, unable to see clearly. Now you might be sitting here thinking, well, can't we have it both ways? Can't we have treasure both on earth and in heaven? Can't we invest in both the temporal here and the eternal? But Jesus says, no. And he goes on to say, no one can serve two masters in verse 24. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. And the AD version uses the word mammon, which is a much broader category than just money. And it comes back to the meaning of the word treasure as being our heart's desire, the thing that is most important in our lives. If our heart's desire is to serve God, and we are using his money and all the other gifts he's given to us for his purposes, but if our heart's desire is our own satisfaction, we are using his money to serve our own selfish wishes. The two things are mutually exclusive. We can't do both. Because the reality is, as I said, that what we have, everything that we have has been given to us by God, and we are simply stewards of it, simply managers of it. Are we using it wisely? At Keswick this year, some of you will know that we launched a £5 million fundraising project to buy a piece of land so that we could expand the ministry. And as one of the speakers put it, as he spoke to a tent full of 3,000 people, he said, the good news is that all the money is there. All the money that we need is there. The bad news is it's still in your pockets. Paul Mahler tells a story of a strong man who is doing a circuit, showing his strength. And rather than ripping up telephone books or bending iron bars, his trick was to take an orange and to squeeze it so tightly that every drop was drained from that orange. I used to invite other people to come up and to take the orange and to see if they could squeeze a bit more orange juice out of it, and nobody could. And then one day, this very weedy looking man came to the front, and the guy thought, well, there's no way this guy is ever going to do it. But this chap took the orange and he squeezed it. And 1, 2, 3 drops of orange juice fell onto the blotting paper. And the strong man was amazed, and he said to the guy, how on earth did you do that? He said, oh, that was easy, I'm the treasurer of the local Baptist church. And I wonder if we're not a bit like that when it comes to investing in God's kingdom. A bit reluctant, a bit stingy, wanting to keep hold of things that God has given to us. God has richly blessed us with, but wanting to keep hold of them for ourselves. So as we come to a finish, let me ask you just a few questions to think about and to pray about. Do I really believe in God's coming kingdom? Do I believe in eternal life? And am I prepared to live now in the light of that future reality? What treasure has God given me? And what is God asking me to do with it? 1 Timothy 6, 17 to 19 is very much a verse for our time, and I'll finish with quoting this verse and I'll hand back over to Steve. Paul says to Timothy, command those who are rich in this present world, and let's be clear about that, that's all of us in this room. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. May God bless us this morning. And may He give us the grace to think clearly about what He would have us do with all the blessings that He's given to us.